I'm ICE's Chemical Business Deputy Editor Will Beecham, and I'm here with International Echem Chairman Paul Hodges. We're just doing an interview ahead of the AFPM conference talking about plans for shale expansions in the US. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Will.
So I'd like to start off by asking you, there's a 50% potentially of capacity increase that's been announced for the US over the next few years. And bearing in mind demographic trends, do you think that US demand or exports can absorb this amount of extra capacity?
I think you've put your finger on the issue there, Will, with the word demographic, because where we are is that in the past people would have said, look, demand is always rising, it's always going up 3 or 4%. All we're doing is we're taking advantage of a low cost position. Obviously we'll be able to sell it, don't need to think about that issue, let's get on and build. Problem today, actually, between 1 in 3 and 1 in 2 of the adult population in the world, in the main countries, is now over the age of 55. We've had the great burst of demand. The demographic dividend has changed to a demographic deficit. That means, unfortunately, that projects like this, vast expansions, can't go ahead in the main because there isn't any more the demand. We're not going to have this 3 or 4% guaranteed constant growth that we've been used to.
Okay, well then what other options are there for these players if they go ahead and put this new capacity in?
Yeah, I mean, let's just talk through the issues and the facts as they are on the table and see where they stack up. Fact number 1, US production of ethylene has still not reached the peak that it saw before the financial crisis. So last year's production was less than it was in the peak. That is also true of all the main derivatives. So polyethylene, ethylene glycol, styrene, PVC. All of these are selling less. Now, I used to write project reports like this for sanction by main boards. And I can't imagine my main board saying, you want to expand, but you can't actually sell all the product you've got. Could you tell me what particular magic wand you're going to plan to wave? Because the only other way of doing it is to say, well, we have a guaranteed supply agreement to a major customer who's got a good credit balance and they have seen something that we can do, and that's a bankable proposition. The other alternatives, exports. Well, exports of polyethylene, for example, the main derivative, have actually fallen 30-35% since 2009. China, potentially the major buyer in the past, is now going very firmly towards its own production. Asia is self-sustaining now. You've already got a lot of Middle Eastern exports coming into that region. So it can't go to Asia. Now maybe some of it could go to Latin America. I mean, Latin America has been filling that gap. But if we look in detail at Latin America, what we see is a lot of that, Brazil for example, was based on growth in China, which is now slowing very fast, and of course the Olympics and the Soccer World Cup. Well, both of those are finished, as it were, from the point of view of ethylene derivative supply. These plants won't come on until 2017, that's after both events. So Latin America is not large enough, and anyway probably can't do it. Europe. Well, in Europe, most of these petrochemical crackers are linked into refineries. If you can't sell the naphtha to the cracker, you have to shut the refinery. If you shut the refinery, Europe has a very bad energy balance. We're looking already pretty nervously about the position with Russia. I just can't see governments allowing this to happen, and I think they will be mad to do it. So there we are. We can't sell all the product we've got already. Perhaps we ought to say, the evidence for the States is that Stephen Pryor, president of ExxonMobil Chemical, is saying it's a mature market, maybe growing 1% a year. So even with reshoring, we can't sell it into exports, we can't close plants down. Well, excuse me, what are we going to do with it then if we build it?
And what would you say to them? I mean, should there be a reconsidering of this whole scheme? Would you suggest people just cancel these projects or downscale them?
It really worries me, Bill. It's not exaggerating to say that I do wake up at night worrying about this, because this is the future of the American petrochemical industry, which is important. It's the future of the European petrochemical. If we make a wrong decision on this scale now, the consequences could quite easily be catastrophic. And so this is where we come back to demographics. Demographics is not an abstract argument, oh, very interesting, but life goes on. Demographics is about the fact there are lots of old people in the world today. Old people don't need to buy very much, and they don't have very much money because they're retiring. So what happened in the past when all these people were younger is no guide to the future. In fact, it's positively misleading. And, if I had one wish, it was that boards of companies would take the trouble to look at the demographics now in detail with an open mind and come to a conclusion before they make any final decision. But I think they would be very surprised by what they find.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Thank you, Will.